Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. During the question and answer session, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. And now I'll turn today's meeting over to Melanie Christensen. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for attending today. We at F5 have been working closely with Dell and VMware to develop a solution around VMware View in user computing. So just to quickly address the agenda, we will be going, VMware will take you through their vision for user-centric computing. F5 will then address dynamic service network for VMware View. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the additional presenters. So again, I'm Melanie Christensen. I am a Business Development Manager for F5 Networks. I focus on the Dell partnership, and I work with several engineers to develop joint enterprise solutions integrating F5 technology. We also have Jeff Danielson, who is a Partner Manager for VMware. Jeff, would you like to describe your role?
Sure. This is Jeff Danielson. I'm a Partner Manager with VMware. I've been with VMware for the last 3 years, but I've been selling VMware for probably 6 years. And I hope today what I can do is just break down what virtual desktops, what end-user computing is looking like today, and what it's moving towards in the future. I'll kick it over to Frank. Frank?
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Melanie. Frank Strobel here. Great to be here. I'm with F5 Networks. I'm part of the F5 Strategic Alliance Organization. I'm dedicated to F5's relationship with VMware, and as such, part of my focus is on the joint solution development, and certainly our solution portfolio around end-user computing, and in particular VMware View, is very strong and has been in the making for a long time, and so we want to share some information with you today about those particular solutions.
I think we may have lost Melanie, so I'll go ahead and take the agenda slide. So I'm going to go ahead and present first with the VMware vision. What I want to do is just break down, give you just do a very quick lesson in language. What I'd like to do is make sure you understand the VMware language and get a general idea of where we're at today and where we're going in the future. And then Frank's going to go into the F5 solutions and how they can enhance and make the end-user experience a good one when you have a View solution. And then, of course, we'll do Q&A at the end. Accelerate past this. So this is Jeff Danielson. One thing I'd like you to do is, if you can, go ahead and take my email address down. I'll take any questions that you have after this presentation. Again, Jeff Danielson, and my email address is first initial J, last name Danielson @VMware.com, JDANIELSON @VMware.com. So any questions that you have after this, please email me. I'll be happy to jump on the phone with you and answer any questions, or even give you any resources that you might need to help get started on this end-user computing journey. So let's take a quick overview of what my slides are. The agenda here, just an overview of end-user computing, our vision, a breakdown of VMware View, which is our license for end-user computing, VNapp, which is probably not as well known of a product, but very essential and important starting your virtualization journey with desktops. And then we're going to go into how to deploy this. Not only I'm going to define what some of these products are, but also how to deploy them and how to get started. So the cloud is changing, right? Is changing computing environment. This is a desktop, and this desktop has a lockdown operating system. It has lockdown applications, and data is directly on this endpoint as well. So you're familiar with this environment. It's probably your environment today. What's also happening in today's world is device proliferation, and you can introduce thin clients, you can introduce notebooks into your environment, tablets, smartphones, BlackBerries, and users are driving the need for these different devices out there. And these different devices, of course, have different operating systems tied to them as well. So you have this push to make make even more complexities in your environment. And users are going to drive the need for all these different devices as well, right? So we have to do something to keep up. And so what we suggest here is to move these endpoints into your private cloud. And private cloud is something that you would host. Of course, your servers are going to run the virtual desktops. And then you can also run them, or you could run them in the public cloud, in Dell Cloud, actually. Dell recently announced a VMware agreement to have their cloud hosted using VMware technology. So let's take a finer look at what we're talking about here and what we want to shift the focus on. So today, the focus is on the PC. You have this hardware with a lockdown operating system. You have all the applications that are tied to that OS, and you also have the data that's on there as well. And what we do when we get into this cycle of if there's a new OS that comes out, let's say Windows 8 next year, what are you going to do? Are you going to do another OS migration? Or you just did your probably Windows 7 migration in the last couple of years, if you have at all. Are you going to do that OS migration to Windows 8 and you're going to make sure all those applications are going to work? We want to focus, and then also, how do you make that work with all of the other endpoints that are being introduced into your environment, all these other devices? The tablets are everywhere now. So we want to focus on the end user and make it easier for them and make them more efficient, not try to make the desktop more efficient. And the way we do that is by decoupling the OS, the applications, the persona, and the data. And what I mean by that is when you virtualize, you're basically putting a virtual desktop in a wrapper. And each layer of it, the operating system, you virtualize that. The application, you can virtualize those as well. Decoupling them from each other so they're not tied to one another. And then also the data as well, decoupling that data so it lives in your virtual environment versus being tied down to a direct piece of hardware, right? So when we do that, when we decouple these applications, let's take a quick look here. Let's take a step back. A virtual machine, all it is a file that looks and feels like a computer. It has a virtual processor, virtual memory, virtual disk. And when you put a virtual machine into a file, what can you do to it? You can segment, you can split it up. You can put the OS in one file, you can put the applications in another file, and you can put the data in another file. And that's decoupling a virtual desktop. That's when you put that in a virtual desktop, you're decoupling those instances. And when you decouple them, now not only can you deliver that virtual desktop to that same hardware at the end on that piece of that desktop, but you can also deliver it to a thin client. You can deliver it to a notebook, and it's not pictured here, but you can deliver it to a tablet. You can deliver it to a smartphone. All you have, and this is one instance. This is not a independent system with its own OS application and data tied to it. It's one virtual desktop now delivered to multiple devices. And we do that using View and ThinApp. So let's take a quick overview of View, what a View environment looks like, or a virtual desktop environment looks like with VMware. First and foremost, it's important to understand that when you are virtualizing desktops, those virtual desktops ride on the same core software that we sell today with vSphere. vSphere is basically ESX with all of the advanced features like vMotion, HA, being able to move virtual machines from one host to the other. And all those virtual desktops sit on that same hosted platform in the back-end data center. The difference is you have a View Manager server or a connection broker that connects those virtual desktops in the data center to endpoints, like a thin client desktop or laptop on the left here. And View Manager is a key component of View and virtual desktops. It acts as a connection broker, it acts as a security server, and it also acts as a licensing server. So from a connection broker standpoint, it will basically allow you to do things like, from a connection broker standpoint, we use a technology called PC over IP. And PC over IP is a Teradici technology built into our software. And PC over IP will allow you to do multi-monitor. It will allow you to print. It will allow you to do single sign-on. It will allow you to do many things that you can do with a desktop today. So it looks and feels like a real desktop at the endpoint. The next thing is security. Virtual desktops don't sit on the endpoints. So where does the data reside? It resides back in the data center on that virtual desktop in your vSphere environment instead of on that endpoint. So this is important for users who, or excuse me, organizations that can't have data free-flowing on their endpoints. So if a notebook is stolen, that data is not going with it if it's a virtual desktop. It's basically in the back-end data center. So security is very important, especially this is a key feature when it comes to deploying an end-user computing solution is that data is on the back-end systems. Last, View Manager acts as a licensing server. So we license View per concurrent user. So if you have a 10-pack of licenses and you have 11 users, if 10 are signed on at the same time and checked out a virtual desktop, then that 11th can't sign in until somebody logs off. So concurrent users means it's only using those licenses as it's in use. So if you have 100 users but only 50 are in use at the same time, you only need 50 licenses. So concurrent users, View Manager makes all that for you. Some other key components to a virtual desktop solution that I'm going to go over is Composer and FinApp. Composer is on the next page, but these are going to be the most critical features in your environment that really let you take advantage of an end-user computing solution with virtualization. So let's take a look at View Composer. In the traditional VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure environment, you're going to have a virtual machine per user. So let's say in this case you had 12 users. Each user is going to have their own virtual desktop, and they're going to use the View Manager server and PC over IP to connect that virtual desktop to that endpoint. But what if you had 100 users in the same format? Each of these virtual machines are just is an image with all the data on there, and those images can get rather large, and you're looking at 30, 40 gigs maybe even higher than that, 50 gigs in size for each virtual desktop. If you had 100 of those, that's a lot of disk space. So with traditional VDI, this works, but at the same time, a little inefficient, right? So with Composer, what you can do is you can break it down so that you can, again, decouple the operating system from the end-user data and even application if you needed to. But the point here is you have 3 golden images. Let's say each of these images you have an XP, a Windows 7, and maybe some type of Linux application over here. But View Composer allows you to take a golden image of the operating system that you're using. In this example, let's say you have a virtual machine, you create virtual processor, give it a virtual disk, and you install Windows 7 into that image. With View Composer, we use a technology called linked clones, and linked clones allows you to map that user's data to that golden image, right? So instead of having a virtual desktop per end user, now you only have 3 virtual desktops with golden images, and all those changed files are mapped to that specific golden image. Here's another great reason this technology is probably going to take off is because if you look at customers, or if you look at yourself, if you're looking to move from XP to Windows 7, what do? Well, you have to strip that desktop down and install Windows 7, and then make sure the applications are all installed from there. Well, with this instance, you can simply create another image. Let's say the image is Windows XP box that you're connected to currently, and you want to move to Windows 7. You create another virtual machine, you install Windows 7 into that golden image, and then you can remap those end users' data to the new Windows 7 application in a matter of minutes versus having to put a lot of man-hours into doing a upgrade to Windows 7 on a local box or a piece of hardware. You're doing it with a virtual desktop, and you're doing it across multiple users in a matter of minutes with a few mouse clicks. So very powerful when it comes to Windows migration with View Composer. Another key feature when it comes to going to an end-user computing solution with virtualization is desktop protection. And in traditional world, you have these party backup, or excuse me, not backup, but antivirus protections that have an agent on each one of your desktops. And they'll run a scan and make sure everything's cool and make sure there's no malware on those systems day to day. But if you did that in a virtual desktop environment, think of all the virtual machines running on a single piece of hardware. That could, slow performance down, put it to a crawl if you put an agent on each one of those virtual desktops. So what we do today with a virtual desktop solution, instead of putting that agent on each one of those virtual machines, we create an appliance and plug that appliance into your third-party antivirus provider. And and that appliance acts as a protection over multiple virtual machines versus just one-on-one. And another benefit to that is instead of those viruses getting onto the system and then the antivirus then cleaning and scrubbing it from there, it has to go through this appliance first before it hits the virtual desktop. So not only is it more efficient because it's not on, an agent's not on each one of these virtual machines, but now the viruses don't even reach the virtual desktop. It hits the appliance first, so much more efficient and much more secure way to manage virtual desktop with an antivirus solution. So one of the last features I'll talk about with you, and there's more than this, but I wanted to make sure this was easy and you got the highlights of it. Offline mode. So if you have users that are mobile and they need to, and they are utilizing a virtual desktop, they can easily be plugged in just the same way, accessing their virtual machine in the back-end data center. And when they're, let's say that user is going to take a plane and needs to take their system with them, they can check out that virtual desktop, put it on a local disk, disconnect, work on that virtual desktop on the plane. When they log back in, the change file then syncs with that back-end virtual machine. Very simple. So mobile users are addressed as well when it comes to a virtual desktop solution. So VNApp, this is probably very underrated when it comes to end-user computing. It doesn't get enough play. It does not get enough recognition, and an easy way for you to start with virtualization. And VNApp was started and developed by video game developers who needed to write their software, but write it so they didn't have to write it for multiple devices out there, multiple hardware systems out there. So they had VNApp that would talk to the underlying operating systems in each one of these platforms instead of having to write several different types of code for their games. So VNApp essentially allows you to create a virtual layer between the application and the operating system. A good example would be, let's say, in today's world is IE6. If you have to use Internet Explorer 6, today's systems, new systems and operating systems won't allow you to install IE6. It's not compatible. However, there are some legacy applications that you need IE6 for. With VNApp, you can VNApp IE6 and then deliver IE6 in the same that you're using IE8 on. So let's take a closer look at that. How do we basically do this? And this picture shows how you have a traditional operating system. You have all your applications tied to that operating system. Well, with VNApp, you can simply virtualize the operating system first, and then, of course, there are maybe some applications that are tied to that virtual OS, but with VNApp, you put all of the virtual applications in a sandbox for some type of file server that is then allows end users to access those VNApp applications, let's say IE6 or even Adobe or Microsoft Office. And instead of having that application locally installed, they open that VNApp application from their sandbox, and it looks like an executable. They double-click it, and it looks like it's running locally if you do a task manager. So what this does is allows you to decouple the application from the operating system. And no longer are you worried about having to make sure your legacy applications are compatible with your underlying operating system. And VNApp is a great way to get started with virtualization. So that's a good segue into my last section here, how to deploy this. The first way to get started is first just take some of your applications out there and VNApp them. Decouple some of those applications from the operating system. And by decoupling that application, any type of changes over the next year, 6 months, whatever it may be, you don't have to worry about your migrations. If it's VNApped, you have a virtual layer that's going to be there talking to that underlying operating system. Next step is virtualize that OS instance, decouple it even more, and then connect those end users to a virtual desktop with VNApped applications and take a phased approach. The last steps may be add some complexity into your environment if you have DMZs, if you have external users. Again, another phased approach. You don't just start up and say, I've got 500 desktops, I'm going to go ahead and virtualize all of them. You take a phased approach like this, spin up your applications, find out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, virtualize those operating systems, connect 10 or 15 users instead of all 500, and slowly begin moving off of the you have doing it and moving into a virtual desktop solution, which will allow you more flexibility. It will also get you ready for this changing world of devices out there where you are moving away from a desktop-only solution. So the important thing here is whenever you're talking about your computing is the end user has to be happy. If they're not happy, then this will not work. So it's very important to make sure this is a sound solution. And not only will our software allow you to do that, but also F5 will allow you to introduce, overall solution that will not only make it better performing, but also make it easy and seamless for your end users. So that's kind of a good segue. There's a few links right here. If you need these links, one thing I would look out for is look at some of the ROI calculators here. It will basically break down how you're running your business today, what man hours are, what your operating expenses are, and then it will also give you a good report on what your savings are from an operating system standpoint if you move to a virtual desktop solution. Several different links out here. You can evaluate View. You can evaluate ThinApp for 60 days. All you have to do is email me at jdanielson@vmware.com, and I'll send you an evaluation and also the evaluator guide as well. If you want list pricing, I can give you list pricing on everything here. Again, just email me. So that being said, that's the part of my presentation. I'm going to pass it on to Frank with F5 to show you how you can make this experience a good one for all end users.
Thank you, Jeff, and you deserved at least a sip of water having talked for the last 20 minutes. Good job there. So while I bring up my slide, wanted to bring up this polling slide here real quick, and if you want to take just a second to go through that, I would appreciate it. And so just for those who joined maybe later, two quick items. My name is Frank Strobel. I'm a business development manager with F5. I'm dedicated to F5's strategic relationship with VMware, and I will be taking you through, on a high level, through the solution set that F5 has in place to support VMware View deployment. And secondly, if you have any questions, there are two options for you. One is during my presentation, you can use the Q&A section on the top of your screen to ask any questions that you might have, and we'll try to address them while we're in the presentation. And, of course, at the end, we will leave you plenty of time to ask your questions over the phone, and we will hopefully be able to address all questions that you will have. So the numbers are coming in here. So as far as concerns, performance seems to be taking the lead, as well as user experience. Surprisingly enough, security is not leading. That's quite interesting, but that's good data. So I will be addressing all four of those areas, and thank you for that. And let me go back to the slides here real quick. Before we dive into the solution itself, a quick overview of F5 and VMware. The two companies are active globally managed partners. That means they're dedicated resources at both companies that focus on the relationship. We have a formal relationship now for more than 5 years. And actually one thing that we're very proud of is that earlier this year we received the Global Partner Technology Innovator Award from VMware. So a demonstration of the investment in joint solution development that we have made, F5 has made on the VMware platform. The great thing here is that we really focus on deep solution development between the two technologies, as well as our integration with Dell for hardware components and service components. And so the benefit is, of course, to you as a customer that those three companies are working together to make those things work and have them tested in the real world. And then to the polling slide that you just saw, so we will dive a little bit into those four areas: security, performance, availability, and user experience. Of course, they're all equally important because if one is not provided, then the other three don't really matter. If you don't have the performance, it doesn't matter that your system is not secure, or because user acceptance will not be given. Of course, if you don't have security, then your IT department will be unhappy because you're opening up your environment to vulnerabilities, and you shouldn't allow that either. So all four of those will need to be addressed equally. And the first one that we will dive into is regarding user experience. And part of the user experience is very simple. It's the login steps. So if you have a virtual desktop running on, let's say, your laptop machine or your iPad, and you have to log into that machine locally, then you have to VPN into your remote desktop environment, and from there your system has to log in against a domain. That's 3 steps, and that's not a big problem if you have to do it once. But if you have to do it over and over again, that can become very frustrating to your end users. And for that reason, F5 has a solution in place that allows for single sign-on, and that single sign-on credentials are being cached, which means that if you get disconnected, you get reconnected without having to go through those 3 steps over and over again. And that might sound simple, but it's those things that really can lead to user frustration. And if your end users are frustrated about that virtual desktop environment, then that can jeopardize the rollout of that environment. Another point related to that is, and my graphics got messed up here a little bit, is basically, and I think we all experience that, is they're constantly reconnecting. So we are a mobile workforce, and mobile might be within the office. You close your laptop, you walk into a meeting room, you open your laptop. Or it might be truly mobile during the commute, between buildings, between client visits, whatever it might be. And every time you reconnect, you have to log in again. And then so if you have the 3 logon steps, that's frustrating. But even if you have a single login, that can become annoying. And so with the F5 solution we have in place, you get reconnected automatically. So no matter where you are, you will be authenticated against your network, and you will get reconnected very quickly and straightforward, which is what you want to have as far as user experience is concerned. Secondly, not only do you get reconnected and we support the single sign-on, you also get reconnected to the existing desktop session, which means if you get disconnected and then you reconnect, instead of being connected to a new virtual machine or a random virtual machine, you will actually get reconnected to your existing desktop session, which that really accelerates that reconnect. And again, speed is king here. You want to make sure that your users, they open up their laptop and they're right there where they left off in that session that they were, and they will have this seamless, quick user experience. And then on the same token here, what we have is basically rate shaping. Rate shaping is really sort of a quality control for traffic management. What that means is that based on the protocol being used in the virtual desktop environment, it's UDP-based, which means that packages arrive whenever they arrive. There is no order to them. But at the same time, this protocol is a bandwidth hog, meaning that it will provide as much bandwidth to a service asking for that bandwidth as possible. That could mean that a user on a virtual desktop watching a YouTube video can basically consume all the bandwidth that is being provided to that end user. At the same time, that then can mean that the services that are actually essential to running that virtual desktop on that machine can suffer. And so it's transparent to the end user, which means they look at it and say, hey, you know what, my virtual desktop is sluggish. They don't know that by them watching a YouTube video that they caused that. So with F5's equipment, we can basically carve out dedicated bandwidth for core services, which means that by an end user watching a YouTube video does not impact the core services that are required to run a smooth virtual desktop environment. So again, this is all to make sure that the user experience is seamless, smooth, and of high quality. The next area I want to talk to real quick is security. And basically, when we talk about security, we focus on all the types of users that are out there. the truly mobile users, so the folks that might be sitting at a local Starbucks and going through that Wi-Fi network, or that are on their mobile device that is running a virtual machine and a virtual desktop image going over a 3G or 4G network, or the new iPhone 5 that will be announced in about an hour and a half, or folks sitting in a branch office or your local office. They all need to have the same level of access to their virtual desktop images and their environment. The security requirements are different, but that needs to be transparent to the end user. They basically need to be able to connect their device to your data center environment in a secure fashion, high performance fashion, and with their profile information being provided to them, meaning that it should not make a difference if I'm sitting at my desk and work on my machine here, or if I take that machine and I'm traveling and I'm sitting in a Starbucks. My credentials should be maintained, my login experience should be the same, and performance should be high. And so with the F5 solution, we provide this quality of user access to all end users independently from the endpoint device they're using or the location they're connecting from. And then as Jeff mentioned, View uses the PC over IP protocol, and basically F5 supports that protocol, and because it's an encrypted protocol, there's not much we can do as far as boosting the performance is concerned, but what we can do is we can make sure that we don't have performance degradation, and that's actually a key differentiator of F5 solution, that we support that protocol, which means that if you use in your environment PC over IP to connect your clients to your virtual desktop environment, you will get the performance out of that protocol. If you don't use that protocol, then of course we support all the other protocols as well, and with those, if they're RDP based, we can also do performance improvements. And then a critical component about security is authentication and authorization. So F5's solution here support really all existing authentication mechanisms. So we're not limiting to you as an enterprise to any specific ones. We really truly support what is in the market, as well as because we have very API open-based platform that allows for scripting. We have a technology called iRules. You can modify your authentication mechanism, meaning that if there is a slight variation in how you authenticate your users, F5 equipment can support that. And then we also, can enforce very strict access policy management, and that's really with our APM module, which is Access Policy Manager, which is a very stringent security solution. And one of the key differentiators that we bring to market is that we have an intuitive visual policy editor where it's really easy for an administrator to create those policies as far as access is concerned. And what is key here with virtual desktop environments is that depending on your user profile, and your user profile could be by department, but could also be by endpoint device, so that you have a different policy for a mobile user, let it be a smartphone, versus a laptop user versus a desktop users. You can easily implement those policies and then have the authentication, authorization, and administration rules in place for those users, and you can easily implement them with the F5 solutions. The last point I want to focus on here is availability and scalability in the data center. So this comes back to performance as well as availability for your end users. The first one is here as far in the data center as far as performance is concerned. As you have seen with Jeff's architectural diagram earlier today, there's the VMware View Manager, connection broker, do your desktop sessions. You can offload processes from those view managers onto the F5 dedicated hardware, such as SSL encryption, which then in turn frees resources on the view management servers that can be used to really process those connection broker related to computing tasks much faster. And also, of course, you can have high availability and load balancing for those view management servers. Each view management server can handle about 2,000 users, but of course, even if you have a smaller number than 2,000, you want to have more than one of those servers, because if that server goes down, you lose your connection brokering to those virtual desktop sessions, which means then in turn your end users don't have access to the virtual desktop image. So you should have at least 2 to be able to ensure high availability. If you have 2, then you want to load balance among them, right? You don't want to just have one sit idle while the other does all the work. Leverage both of them, load balance them. And if you, of course, if you have more than 2, that becomes even more important. And then with the health checks built into the F5 platform, you can see which of those servers is performing the best, which one should receive new connection requests, and so on. So we can help you scale within the data center. We can also provide scalability when you have multiple view pods. A view pod supports about 10,000 users. So if you have more than one pod, or if you have less than 10,000 users, but you have distributed your view environment across multiple data centers for failover and disaster avoidance, we can provide a single namespace solution for VMware View. That basically means that if an end user wants to connect to their virtual desktop, they don't have to worry about where to connect to. They type in the single namespace that you have provided to them. So, for example, my desktop as .example.com. The F5 solution then will make sure that they can get connected to the preferred data center, or in the case of a disaster or unavailability of a data center, gets connected to whatever data center has the best performance capacity, whatever setting you have used as an administrator to determine which data center they should be connected to. Again, transparent to the end user, which is important because you want to make it easy and seamless for them to connect to their virtual desktop environment. And then the last one I want to talk to real quick is about global availability. And global availability here really means truly global, as well as, you know, let's say East Coast to West Coast. Two use cases here that we see all the time are, one is you want to connect the users to the best performing data center, and that could be the one with the lowest latency. So if you have a West Coast user, you don't want to have them travel all the way across the East Coast to get connected to the data center. You want to send them to the West Coast data center to have the lowest latency, which will help with performance of their virtual desktop. But also, if your West Coast center, for example, is not available, you want to make sure that they still get connected. You then take into, you know, you're okay with the higher latency maybe that they experience as long as they get connected at all. And in true global, if they're a European user, you want to make sure they get connected to the European data center versus the North American data center. And GTM, Global Traffic Manager from F5, provides that global availability management automatically based on health checks and other settings that you can implement. So in summary, we really help with improving and streamlining the user experience. We help with the security aspect, and then we scale and provide high availability, both local, on a metro level, as well as truly global. And we're providing flexible deployment architecture and product platforms to support any size of view deployments that you might be working on. And what is important, and the last thought that I want to bring into this conversation is what we have seen is that many customers today are working on proof of concept or pilot engagements, and sometimes the topics of high availability, access management, security are not taken into consideration as much as they probably should be, because once you go out of the pilot and go into production and you'll roll it out now from 200 users to 1,000 users, 5,000, 10,000, whatever that number might be, those issues become very important. And if you address them early on, you will be in better shape when it comes to production rollout. And so one of the things that I encourage you to look into is that all of our solutions are now available as virtual editions, which means instead of a dedicated hardware, they run on an ESX or ESXi host. So you can implement them. You can test the security settings, the scalability settings, and all those things in a limited environment on a virtual edition. The nice thing is any rules that you create once you get to production rollout, and you might need to go to dedicated hardware if your scalability requirements are such, those rules can migrate very easily to that dedicated hardware because the virtual editions are feature and functionality parity between them to our hardware. So it's something that I encourage you to consider when you look at those pilot engagements. And with that, that's, I believe, the presentation part for today. We would like to open it up to any questions that you might have. And I believe you're pressing *1 to ask a question.
Correct. This is the operator. If you'd like to ask a question, press *1. Please also unmute your line and record your name to be introduced. Again, for questions, press *1. And if you'd like to withdraw the request at any time, you may press *2. Thank you. One moment for your first question.
And also a reminder, if you don't want to ask your question over the phone, you can use the Q&A section on live meeting to ask your question. We will then read back the question over the phone. We will not mention your name if you're concerned about that. And so that's another way how you can ask questions. And when I think about the question, I have one for you. So who made it to VMware World 2011 in Las Vegas?
And Frank, while we're waiting on the questions, there was a lot of in-user computing announcements at VMworld 2011. So that there's some buzzwords out there like App Blast and Project Octopus. That's actually a real name of the project that we're doing. So you may want to Google some of those as App Blast and Project Octopus, and you'll probably find some of the videos that we have out there. I think we have them out there on YouTube or VMware TV. So check that out.
Thank you. And currently we're showing no questions from the phone. As a reminder, for questions or comments, press *1. All right, from the phone, we're showing no questions.
Okay, so I think we'll do a last call here for questions. So if you have any questions, this is your chance to get them answered. If you have Jeff's email address, and I'll also give you another one here if you want to chat that down. That is VMware Partnership, one word, VMware Partnership @f5.com. If you have any F5 related questions to View or what we do around vSphere or any other of the VMware products, you can ask those questions against that email alias, VMware Partnership @f5.com. I also encourage you to go to f5.com/VMware, and that's our portfolio of solutions for VMware as a platform. As you will see on that side, we have a lot of them, and there's a very deep technical documentation on that side, the deployment guides that will guide you step by step through how to make F5 work in VMware environments. And that's, of course, including vSphere, View, vCloud Director, and many of the other solutions that VMware has. So I encourage you to visit that site, f5.com/VMware. And if we have no questions, then would like to say thank you for attending today's webinar. I hope you found this information useful. Have a great day and enjoy the Apple announcement. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. That does conclude today's conference. You may disconnect at this time.